Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. Some elections send messages, and last month's polling certainly sent a message that was heard across the land, including in Washington, Albany, and City Hall. Now, what that message is depends on who you ask. The Republican takeover of the United States Senate and the cementing of Republican control in the state Senate in Albany have signaled that progressive legislation faces a far steeper crime, increasing the minimum wage, reforming and humanizing the immigration system, including a DREAM Act for New York undocumented, passing some form of campaign finance reform, even extending New York City's rent regulations just got a lot harder. Mayor de Blasio may not have done himself or the city any favors with his ardent push for a Democratic takeover of the state Senate, which our re-elected Governor Andrew Cuomo did not seem too concerned about. In fact, de Blasio became the whipping boy of choice for Republican campaigns, proving once again that New York City, despite our record of relative civic peace and growth, jobs, balanced budgets, can still serve as a bad example for those who chose to play to the cheap seats. Democrats even lost 3 congressional seats in New York, as we were not immune to a national wave that guaranteed President Obama an even tougher road for his last 2 years with congressional Republicans. Only 1 week after he issued his executive order on immigration, the GOP is already sizing up punitive measures, suggesting to many that they remain more committed to blocking the president than putting forth an agenda of their own. The result is a political landscape in which the middle is increasingly hollowed out. The sensible center, where most issues get hashed out, is harder and harder to find. National events like the unrest in Ferguson, Missouri, and across the country, following the failure of a grand jury to indict the police officer who killed Michael Brown, have thrust the fragility of race relations, particularly relations between the police and communities of color, back to the front burner. Just before we taped this show, word came out of Staten Island that a grand jury did not issue an indictment of the officer involved in the chokehold killing of Eric Garner, so we are not immune from those concerns. We're joined by 4 New Yorkers involved in public debates about the election and a lot more to try and sort out what it all means. Michael Aronson is a member of the editorial board of the Daily News. John Burnett has spent his career in the financial industry and was the Republican candidate for New York City Comptroller last year and now serves as a strategist for the New York State Republican Party. Bertha Lewis has spent decades as a progressive activist and is the founder and president of the Black Institute, and Hector Cordero-Guzman is a professor in the School of Public Affairs at Baruch College. Kind of dominate a lot of what we were, kind of take over a lot of what we're going to try to discuss, but what we intended to discuss.
It was a hell of a day today, and even your framing of the issue speaks to what happened here in New York on Staten Island. I remember, I'm old enough to remember the Rodney King beating.
In L.A.
And in Los Angeles, everybody said, oh, it's right there, it's on tape, everyone can see it, and everyone expected a certain outcome. And I remember back then, and I couldn't understand why. And I said to myself, just because it's on tape doesn't mean anything. And, you know, folks kind of poo-pooed me, but I was the skeptic back then. And even today, with this indictment not coming in, you know, you're not surprised, but then you are, because you always, if you're black in America, you hold out that little shred of hope that somehow it'll be different this time. And what you realize is this phrase that we use about having 2 Americas is so true. Because even on a videotape, what I, as an African-American woman, see is not what the rest of America sees. And in this last midterm election, what Republicans saw was not the same thing that African Americans and people of color and immigrants and other folks saw. Republicans saw a real need to, like, this is an issue that we must come out and we must vote on. And, you know, give credit where credit is due. You know, you got to turn out your vote. And so even though today people are gathering in the streets, and there's going to be disruption, because not every American sees what you see. And not every American goes to the polling booth and casts a vote, very same issue, the way that you would, because we see two different things in this post-racial America.
John, let me ask you the same question. We're looking at the events of the day, and we do want to fit them into a broader context, but the immediacy of the day is not something that we should pass over.
Right, right. I mean, first of all, it's terrible when anyone loses their life. I was really more so concerned about the evidence that was presented to the grand jury, and hopefully we can actually get insight as to what was presented to them. Because oftentimes people think that our legal system is a court of justice, but it's a court of law. And when you enter a court of law, they're going to operate by operation of law, not by any other criteria. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer. Let me just make sure that's clear. And I'm not one that doesn't believe in justice. Of course I believe in justice. But then we have to look at things holistically. He resisted arrest. He had priors, and he was suspected of, selling cigarettes that are governed by taxation. And I'm not saying that that's the reason why he should lose his life. What I'm saying is that in a situation like that, the outcome might have been a little different if he would have allowed himself to be arrested because of the probable cause that the police had. And I'm not saying that he would have likely walked away because he didn't have anything on him. I think the message that we have to send to our children is how, and teach them, and all adults, how do you interact with the police? The moment you resist the police, it's going to escalate into a certain situation. I'm not justifying their actions at all. I'm just saying how we're supposed to conduct ourselves, not just blacks, anyone for that matter.
Hector, this is
a horrible state of affairs.
This is an issue that's felt obviously beyond.
I think I'm not here, or we're not here to debate the specific facts. I think the travesty is that there wasn't a trial to debate.
That's right.
What the actual facts were, at least in the Rodney King case.
That's right.
There was outrage because there was a trial. They moved the trial outside of L.A.
And a man is
Simi
dead.
Valley,
Yeah.
conveniently, they got the outcome in a way that they wanted.
wanted.
But at least there was a trial. In this case, there was a ruling of a homicide, and no one apparently killed this man. And again, everyone can see the video, make their own judgments about whether he was resisting or not resisting, or whether he
And of course,
started resisting and then it became an attack.
And of
we
course,
can all judge that.
nobody knew he had priors at the time.
Doesn't matter whether he had priors.
It doesn't
We're not
matter.
judged
That's
on
all
our
after the
priors.
fact.
And just to make it clear, I'm not saying that I'm judging anyone. What I'm saying is that, and I don't have an opinion either way. Mm-hmm. What I want to do, right, because I don't know what evidence that was presented to the grand jury, I want to make sure that I take an objective viewpoint to see what was presented, then analyze it and pick it apart.
It's not the America that I learned about in school, that you do the things in secret and no one really knows what the evidence is. And while we're here debating what was actually presented to the grand jury. Hell with that.
Actually,
put it out in public. Let's talk about it.
Actually, what
It will actually come out in public.
Actually, Donovan wants to make the grand jury public.
Well, I had the the privilege or the obligation of serving on a grand jury a few years ago, and it's a different animal. It is by law all secret. You're not allowed to say anything about what happened in the grand jury, and to do so is a crime. And the Staten Island District Attorney, Dan Donovan, excuse me, when he put out a 2-page explanation of what happened today, he explained that this is not a trial. This is nothing you've ever seen on TV, or there's no video in it. There are no witnesses. There are no newspaper reporters. It's a secret process. And
sometimes there are witnesses.
Well, there are witnesses that go in.
There are people who appear before the grand jury. But the law says that the only people who are allowed to discuss it are the witnesses themselves. The grand jurors can't discuss it, and the prosecutor. And I know this is not a whole discussion about grand juries. The law in New York is different than the law in Missouri, where they had the grand jury which chose not to take action against the police officer there. In Ferguson, Missouri law allows for the release of grand jury testimony and witnesses and evidence. New York law prohibits it. However, the grand jury is a part of the court in New York, and the courts have the power to release certain things. So you're right. The district attorney today petitioned the court to say, please release, I don't know what he's asked to release, either medical reports or witness interviews or other things. I mean, everyone has seen the video. I mean, the Daily News got that video the night it happened and published it the next day, and, you know, everyone can see. And when the gentleman is saying, I can't breathe, and then you find out later he died of a heart attack in the custody of the police and the paramedics.
He died of asphyxiation. Was it a heart attack?
It was ruled a heart attack. Well, a homicide.
But again, why there's not a trial? Why does it have to be a secret?
This is not a law discussion, but a homicide is when your death is caused by another person.
Right. That's a homicide is not a murder.
And you know, if some robber comes in here and, you know, I fight with him and I push him off and he hits his head and he dies, that's a homicide. I have committed a homicide even though I've committed no crime because it was self-defense. So hopefully the district attorney's argument before the judge will prevail. The judge will release what can be released. There are still potential options. The federal government can come in and investigate whether Mr. Garner's civil rights were affected, which is what happened in Rodney King. In Rodney King, he was acquitted of, the officers were acquitted of state charges. The federal government came in, they said that there was a violation of Mr. King's civil rights for being on the streets, and convictions were won, which has also happened in other cases here in New York, say Abner Louima. That was a federal prosecution, not a state prosecution. And actually, the person who prosecuted that, Loretta Lynch, who's the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney, is now the nominee to be the United States Attorney General. Right. So,
and now has jurisdiction over Staten Island, in her current position.
And currently, as the Brooklyn United States Attorney, I don't think she's going to be handling that case. I think she's busy.
Busy.
But it's to someone unfamiliar with the system, it's like, why is there no charge? Why is there no charge? That's just the system that we have.
And to that point, it's not
It
over.
is the system. That's what I think everyone's saying.
But to
it's a
Mike's
problem.
point,
Yeah.
it's not over. It continues.
But this is interesting, you know, what Mr. Burnett said, you know, two things that strike me. And I think that folks have to just stop and just stop accepting it and just say no. One, that you must always be submissive to the police. They are public servants of ours. They are here to serve and protect me and you. You have every right, I contend, to question an officer and to assert yourself as a citizen. And so this notion that we should all accept bowing down and being submissive to the police is false and wrong and is part of the system that needs to be changed. Number two, another statement, well, there's justice and then there's the law. If the law does not line up with justice,
Change the law.
then change the law in order to fix this system. There should not be any daylight between justice and the law. What is just is not always what's presented in court. Here's what we know, and what I know, and what my ancestors know as people of color, and especially as African Americans in this country. The law was never made for us. And here we are in the 21st century, and the law still does not apply, it is not made for us. And I think when we look at these police shootings, and we just had a shooting of a 12-year-old boy, and
Cleveland.
some in Cleveland, and some of what we also have found out, there's been hundreds of police shootings that don't even get recorded.
Don't get recorded by the federal government.
And it really is connected to our political landscape right now, because this is a tale of two countries. there's a seismic shift in demographics. And I think it's fair to say
Towards which?
towards which is black and brown. And the browning and blackening of this country is causing a lot of angst and anxiety and a lot of reaction. And so, again, folks go to the voting booth and make an issue about the minimum wage and why it should and should not be raised. And different lenses are put on. And just as different lenses are put on in the justice system.
Well,
and we
in fact,
use this progressive mayor, Mayor de Blasio, who's running this huge machinery, you know, 8 million plus folks in this city. That, by the way, has been under Republican rule for 20 years, and use him in upstate races. He's a Democrat. Why wouldn't one Democrat want the Senate to be Democratic?
Oh, he would want it, but Republicans would not want it. I mean, you know, the use of de Blasio in upstate races is not a new thing. You know, whether he was de Blasio or whether he was Bloomberg or Giuliani, an upstate person is going to say, don't do this, the bad people in New York City, it's a bipartisan fear of New York City. But it's interesting, if this discussion was supposed to be, you know, what have the elections left us with, if these non-grand jury actions had occurred a week or two before the election, I don't know if it would have made a difference in people's actions or consciousness.
Well, you also had,
either way,
because the middle has been hollowed out to, I believe, to a large degree. On the national level, you had so many senators in Colorado. Senator Udall ran away from the president on immigration, stayed away from the immigration issue. He thought it was a negative,
and he still lost.
You know, I mean, I've always thought that if you're a Democrat and you got a Democratic president, you run with him. You're stuck with him whether you like it or not. So you might as well, you know, exploit the real pluses.
But people can tell. People can tell
when you're a phony.
And when you're a fake and a phony. And I do have to lay it at the feet of Democrats in this midterm election. One, there was no real push for voter registration drives and to pull those folks out to the polls. And then this sort of like, I thought people were on drugs. I don't know the president. I don't know. I can't tell you who I voted for. So nobody likes a fake.
But that was in particular.
And Democrats need to be Democrats.
That was in particular. I'm sorry.
But and I want to make the statement because as some of your audience may know, as a founder of the Working Families Party, that was the biggest mistake ever, and I had supported Zephyr Teachout in the primary.
You're saying it was the biggest mistake to go
that
with
the party went with endorsing someone.
But he made all those promises.
And I know, but this is not a Broadway musical, promises here. This is real life.
Well, if I can address what you said previously, and let me preface my statement by saying that I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Let me quote a Tuskegee airman who actually was Martin Luther King's bodyguard. He said, when the consciousness of man is in conflict with the law must be peacefully broken.
Okay.
That's the person that walked with Dr. Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And Martin Luther King's premise as well. And what that movement really focused on was addressing the law. So that's essentially what I'm saying, is that not to be passive. You can protest, but protest peacefully. Not rioting, not burning down buildings and breaking the law to protest the law.
Well, I kind of disagree with that, because in all movements, there's been, as an organizer.
There's also a difference between rioting and trashing buildings and breaking the law.
But even so, as an organizer, you can have different
change the course
tactics
of this nation.
And in every movement,
so let's not
you know,
belittle
people. No, in every
peaceful
movement,
protests
let's
and
not
structured
belittle folks who are also forceful and aggressive. And the anti-apartheid movement, one of our greatest icons, you know, took to really violent civil disobedience. Folks took to the streets. So no movement has always been nice and placid.
To the streets
Everything has its place. And I adhere to the axiom by my brother Malcolm X, by any means necessary. And there are many different ways. And I'm sorry, I just have to say, when you are treated in a subhuman way and then asked to be superhuman in your response, when you are met with continuous aggression, with impunity, and then asked to bear it peacefully, that is a recipe for mental disorder. And it is surprising and maybe a testament to this country that this country is not burning from coast to coast right now.
I don't
because
know.
people have chosen to use different methods.
Let me just make one thing clear. I'm not advocating my people, at least my people, advocating for violence. That will get us nowhere. That'll get more people shot and more people incarcerated.
Well, I'm not advocating that people just peacefully bear any sort of aggression against them.
I strategically recommend addressing the laws, because that's what this country is going to go by, operation of law. Two, to make sure we get back to values, family values, get back to, in terms of participating in capitalism. We don't have any wealth. And also politically, when you look at every other ethnicity in this country, you have some Democrat and you have some Republican. Black people are predominantly 99.9% Democrat. We don't even operate, we don't even vote in mass numbers when it's time for election, and then we only advocate on one side of the political spectrum.
Well,
we fail.
Be a different episode of CUNY Forum.
We fail to fully engage and operate on both sides of the political spectrum.
Well, maybe.
Now I had someone say, well, you know, based upon their perception,
why should we?
The Republican Party is not for us. Well, history, right? History would tell us the Democratic Party was part of the racist South.
Yeah,
that didn't
history,
stop.
right,
But that didn't stop us then.
Apart from both of these parties.
Working Families Party, right?
Working Families Party.
Working families.
Like all of these parties.
We need to engage.
If you focus on the Garner case,
right.
I think the outrage that at least I feel is that the officer broke the law.
Right.
Isn't there a law against officers chokeholding
it's
suspects
illegal.
for whatever reason, right? So that's the outrage that people see on the video. That when a person breaks the law, selling looses on the street, the full entire force of the NYPD comes to save the city. But when an officer breaks the law, everybody's, oh, wait a minute, we have to consider the context and the circumstances and whether he intended or not intended. The man's dead and he was a family man. He had 6 children, he had grandchildren.
True.
He wasn't breaking any values that you or I would disagree people should have.
Well, you can't look at one side. You got to look at things holistically, right? Critical
That's my point.
thinking.
That's my point.
Right? So yes, there was a chokehold, alleged chokehold.
It wasn't an alleged chokehold. It was found. The medical examiner.
I'm saying.
The medical examiner found that he died as a result of a chokehold.
I said chokehold, and then and I'm representing all perspectives. There was a chokehold.
I mean, you assume that the medical examiner establishes a fact.
Well, I mean,
others.
People allege the earth is flat.
Then others also point out that the officers were trying to arrest him and whatnot. So, I mean, there's 2 sides to every story.
There's 3 sides. there's this side, that side, and then there's the truth.
And again, I'm not.
The truth is closer, it seems to me, to one of the sides in this particular situation.
And there should not be any, violence. I mean, I don't think anyone's condoning any violence.
Back.
I mean, people should have the right to go out on the street, to
take
protest, and there should not be police violence against people, and people violence against the police.
jury.
End of story.
But it does
we
feed
need to
in.
advocate.
I usually don't lose this much control this early.
But it does,
It's
Bob.
like we're in the
you have
streets
to
right now,
bring it
right?
back to there is not just a justice system or laws that need to be changed. I wholeheartedly agree en masse. But also we have a political system that needs to be changed. And you are right. Historically, neither party in this country has ever truly been for my folks. I mean, Lincoln didn't free the slaves because he was Daniel Day-Lewis in some movie and felt some compassion. This was all about business and commerce and politics. It wasn't about the humanity. So we're not looking at the fact that a human being is dead. When we look at the participation in this last election, there has been continuous and ongoing voter suppression, not by Democrats, but by the current modern Republican Party. To whatever the low turnout, still the suppression of however 2 or 3 Negroes turn out. Also, let's just look at a system in which big money reigns. And so I'm not willing to say, well, I'm going to play in this system and just bring another shade darker to it when I have a Supreme Court that makes a ruling, you know, about Citizens United and the role that money plays.
But that argument, the argument you're making got a lot, I'm going to ask both of you to bring in, it got a lot harder as a result of this election.
Yes, it did.
It got a lot harder because, you know, frankly, Obama voters who turn out in 2008 and 2012 don't turn out in 2010 and 2014. And you have Democrats who run away from him, like happened
with the immigration
particularly around the immigration issue.
But what I don't understand is why has immigration become such a partisan issue? And I think it maybe relates to Bertha's previous point about fear of demographic change.
Oh, I think, well, we are close to becoming a majority-minority country, just as we are a majority-minority city.
Immigration did not used to be such a divisive
No, it used to be cheap labor, and Republicans liked it.
Well,
right.
And not just cheap labor, it used to be all kinds of labor. If you look at demographics, and everybody can look at a population pyramid and know that the baby boom generation is aging.
I know my people, I'm the grandchildren of immigrants. My people would not be allowed in today. So,
well, exactly. So I mean, I think we need to be. They did run away from that issue, and they paid the price in terms of Latino turnout, in terms of Latino enthusiasm, and in terms of other enthusiasm. But the analysis that's emerging is that we are facing much more polarized.
It's that absence of a middle.
Right. I mean, that the Republicans feel they can win by just peeling off more Southern whites from the Democrats. I mean, and forget about appealing to Latinos, forget about appealing to anybody, you know, African Americans or anybody else. So long as they can convert a few more Southern whites to their side, they can win presidential. I don't see the numbers that way. But
well, setting aside Southern whites, I mean, you saw what happened in New York, where Democrats lost congressional seats in Long Island, of course, upstate, lost the state Senate in real numbers, not just in the strange independent Democratic conference, and that has implications for the city.
Right, and I think de Blasio overplayed his hand. He could have pushed for Democrats, but by being so vocal, it backfired on him. One thing that's changed politically since the election is that Obama said, okay, you're not going to do immigration, I'm going to do what I can by myself. And so he issued the executive order to stop deportation orders affecting maybe about 5 million people. And that's good for those 5 million people. You know, we're not going to round up 11 million people and ask them to, you know, take a plane or a boat out of here. And so those 5 million people.
Not at once. At least not at once.
Right.
We're doing it $400,000.
Those 5 million will now have, the ability, at least for the next 2 years, to
Legalize.
do what they need to. The problem is, it might make it even harder to find a deal with. There are some Republicans who want to do a deal on immigration to affect the other 6 million immigrants, and harder to do deals on all other kinds of legislation that needs to be addressed by the Congress.
What deal? I don't know what deal we're talking about.
Well, there was
The deal that never happened, that we all were still waiting for?
The deal that the Senate passed?
The magical deal?
It was fairly close in the Senate. It was fairly close in the Senate.
Which deal?
Until a plan on immigration.
It passed.
And,
it passed the Senate, right.
Then, well, it didn't come up for, it needed to come up for a final vote, and Chuck Schumer was trying to push it early in the summer, didn't get it, but the block was always in the House, where there's different factions, and
No, but the question, Michael,
someone
we've
has
had this
the
discussion.
outflanking another, and I think that the top leadership of the Republicans in Washington, McConnell in the Senate and Boehner in the House, realize that there needs to be a consensus on immigration. But
Yeah, but
getting there is.
But do you believe, and I want to throw this to everybody, are the Republicans motivated by blocking Obama, or is there any semblance of a positive program of what they want to move towards, or is it just stop this guy because he's not like us?
Well, they have two goals. They want to thwart him politically because he's of the other party, and but they also want to get things done and not just be the party of opposition. And now that they have control,
See, that's the part I haven't seen.
And now that they have control of the entire Congress, it's incumbent upon them. Okay, propose some legislation. Don't just say no. You write the laws. You're the House. You're the Senate. Write some laws. Write something that Obama can accept.
We're waiting.
Well, they haven't started yet. They start in January.
But they could. And here's my thing. Look, I've been a lifelong Democrat, and my people have been lifelong Democrats, and we've been in and out and up and down. And Fannie Lou Hamer is one of my heroes, who challenged the Southern Democrats, and you got to bang on the door, and we must participate holistically.
Right.
And look, again, I'm one of these angry black women, and
you're not that angry.
Yes. Oh, you just don't know.
Don't push that point too hard.
And you walk around, but I always have that glimmer of hope. So here's what I think, Brother Burnett, take to your Republican brothers and sisters. One, stop obsessing about the border. Immigration, everybody didn't jump over the border. We actually have black faces that are immigrants. We actually have African immigrants that have the diversity visa in common with Eastern Europeans. Let's make it an economic issue. Broaden that frame, so that this obsession about Latinos doesn't play into any racial animus. Woo, let's have a big old hairy jobs campaign, a Republican version of the WPA. All right, everybody, back to work. Build those bridges, get those roads done, get these massive training jobs done, rural as well as urban, pair them up together. Let's boost this economy, have their own WPA style version of jobs. Those two things, if first of all, would freak people out, would totally turn everything on its head. And then the third leg of the stool is you could just drop. Here's what we have. We have the government takes responsibility for voter registration. When you graduate, you get your voter registration card in your hand. This is the most sacred thing that we can do. And we say, everyone to the polls. This is a technological society, and we can root out any voter fraud. Those three things would totally change the conversation knock everybody's heads off. And you
most,
know what? Republicans would win.
I think Democrats and Republicans both want the same thing.
No, they don't.
Let me finish. It's almost like a relationship. Both want the same things, but both see things differently in terms of execution.
The lens.
Many times, anyone could come up with great ideas, but the bottom line is how you're going to pay for it. How are we going to pay for it? How is it going to be implemented? Let's go back to the immigration thing, right? So I think both sides saw the need for immigration reform, right? The Senate passed it. The House was under a different opinion that instead of coming up with a comprehensive bill that we're not likely to execute, right? Because there's been bills passed previously but not executed. Let me finish. Let's pass it in piecemeal, so that way the most critical points. So that way we're not burdened down with a lot of bureaucracy.
We said yes.
The president said yes. And what happened with that? They said, "Oh, we can't take yes. We'll change our mind." That's exactly what happened. There is a historical record. I mean, that's what we do at universities. We look at. We can't make stuff up about laws that were not enforced.
As far as the infrastructure, we all understand our infrastructure in the U.S. is terrible.
Shameful.
Is very shameful. But there's been a lot of ways at the state and federal level, no one's against making that investment, but how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to structure our current tax base, how we're going to structure the way we spend money. Scott Stringer, my former opponent, came out with a report that was staggering, just as an example. In terms of the amount of money that the DOE spent on new technology, and right now, the majority of those computers, iPads, that's sitting in a closet. They don't know where it is. Waste.
I'm with you, brother.
Hey, so it's about bringing a level of accountability. The amount of money that we waste can go back into creating jobs, can go back into...
But the Republicans control the Congress, and so you say,
now,
guess
starting
what?
January.
We're going to make immigration reform. We're going to do infrastructure. We're going to open up voting for everyone. You guys got the reins. You can control the means, and you can control the execution. That's all I'm saying is just go.
And we'll see how that plays out, right?
Because
the other side has shown that they don't want to work together either.
You own it.
And unfortunately, we'll see January 1.
You control everything.
We'll see January 1.
Let's talk about.
The president wants to work with the House, and the House.
Let's talk about January. Let's talk about after January 1 in New York City.
He's going to have a big New Year's party, and we're going to come to his house and see how it works.
It's also the case that amidst this incredible Republican wave that swept over, Albany, swept over the country, swept over the Senate, swept over state legislatures, swept over governor's offices, a number of states overwhelmingly passed increases in the minimum wage. At the same time that they were electing conservative Republicans.
Right.
A number of states, Oregon, and I can't remember some of the other states, liberalized, in the case of Oregon, legalized marijuana, which is one of the causes of probably the greatest cause of unequal policing and the
incarceration
and the incarceration of particularly young men
of
color.
Swishers and cigarettes.
And so at the same time that
like they're selling heroin.
But what does it mean? What happened? What does it mean for things like raising the minimum wage in New York? What does it mean for even extending rent regulation?
If we had a referendum on raising the minimum wage in New York, it would pass.
Just like that.
And pretty much every.
Republicans in New York support.
I said a referendum.
That's right.
New Jersey, right across the river, the legislature about a year ago passed an increase in the minimum wage.
Didn't Chicago?
Connecticut did also.
Chris Christie vetoed it. The legislature then said, we're putting it on the ballot. They put it on the ballot. He said, that's a terrible thing to do. They put it in the ballot. It passed overwhelmingly. So it's not everyone.
So the inequality issue does resonate. It doesn't show up in candidate elections, but you do see it.
I think
nobody wins an election running against an increase in the minimum wage, because everyone could say, well, my kid could be earning that, after college, or nobody campaigns against raising minimum wage. When they're in office, then they play around with it. So it's not a surprise that
it's
not a surprise that it would pass.
Right, but there were a number of
presented to the
individual issues on the so-called progressive agenda that individually, piece by piece, are quite popular.
Yeah.
But yet, when you run, partisan elections, Republicans win, which suggests to me somehow that maybe there's something cultural at play.
Well, if you're asking me, I think that when Democrats when Democrats want to run like Republicans, the public elects Republicans.
Yeah.
Because why would they elect a Democrat that wants to be a Republican when they can elect the real thing?
That's right.
And hold them accountable directly, right?
That's
Because
right.
at least they voted for them and they can say, do our thing. And the problem in this election was that Democrats did not turn out their vote.
That's right.
And ran away from their issues, which, surprise, surprise, in their election, they realized the people were in favor of.
And they ran away from their president.
They ran away from their president because the president is not popular in national polls because the attacks for the last 6 years against him.
It's
not just
It's not every 6 years.
The attacks against him over the last 6 years have had an effect, and if anybody empirically wants to challenge that premise, get some data and figure it out.
But
Everybody knows
George
that
Bush's-
the attacks over the last 6 years have had an
Ask the
effect.
people in
If you add to
Chicago.
that his own incompetence on some issues like immigration,
Ask the people
then
in
of course it's not a
Chicago
pretty picture.
that don't have jobs.
Well-
people in New York that don't have jobs. People in this country that don't have jobs.
Part of there is a general.
That's the key.
I think there's a general dissatisfaction in the country with job opportunity and getting ahead. Even though inflation is low, people don't feel as though
More jobs
they're
have been
doing as
created
well.
than in the previous
But in terms of
administration,
of
Is that a fact
Obama,
or-
in
or a
terms of
matter of
Obama,
opinion?
Low-paying jobs.
every president
Suffers in the 6th year.
suffers in his off-year elections. Okay,
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan lost the Senate in his 6th year. Bill Clinton, lost seats. George Bush lost the House in his 6th year. So he was destined to lose. He was destined to lose seats in the Senate, which he did, lose seats in the House, lose governorships. But interesting about governorships, Democrats won places. They won in. Where did they win? They won in somewhere.
They did win. I can't remember.
I know they did somewhere.
They almost won Florida, but they didn't.
No, I'm
They
saying
almost won.
Republicans won the governorship in
They won
Illinois.
it in Maryland. They won it in Illinois.
Illinois.
They won it in Massachusetts.
So it's a pushback. So
Yes.
George Bush's 6 years is a pushback. Obama's a pushback. He knew that going in.
Yes.
But he's still there for the next 2 years, and hopefully he can do something with the Republicans who are now ascendant in the Congress.
But how are we going to create jobs? That's the key.
Well,
We can spend all day
if you believe that government, it seems to
attacking
me,
each other all day long.
Come up with that answer, you'll be
nothing
president.
for the
So,
audience.
Well, do you
government
think
helping-
there's a
Let's hear
role
it.
in government to
hear it.
create jobs? You think the government
Have a
has
role?
a piece of that?
Let me, just for clarification, do you mean government jobs or creating
the
jobs in the
government
private sector?
creating the conditions for
Both.
jobs,
Okay.
including public works,
Exactly.
including infrastructure jobs.
Right, and I think that's a great idea. It's about, again, going back to my previous comment, how are we going to execute that? There are billions on top of billions of dollars overseas that U.S. companies keep overseas because of the 40% tax bill to bring it back on shore. Right? That's a fact. It's a fact, indisputable.
It's also a fact that they don't even pay that rate. That's a fact too.
That's not.
All right, let me stop for a second.
repatriation.
Let's start to take a couple of questions.
Right.
Tell us your name and your campus and ask the question, please.
My name is Sampath Gunawardena. I'm from John Jay College, and I actually have a question. For the gentleman from the Daily News about the Eric Garner case and the video. I wanted to ask, how come we can't get any record of an unedited first video? Because when you look at the video, the situation that happened right before, whatever happened right before the police said they were going to arrest him, we can't see that because sometimes I believe that police sometimes have the power to aggress situations to make them worse when they could degress the situation. And how come we can't see that part of the video?
As I remember, the video was taken by a fellow who was there, and the Daily News, gets alerts about there was an arrest or there was something. So a Daily News photographer went out to the scene, and when the photographer was there, this fellow approached the photographer and said, "Hey, I have a cell phone video. And so the Daily News, you know, basically acquired this from the fellow who took it on the cell phone. And I think that that might be the entirety of what there is. That, you know, he was there, he was just trying to take it. He turned off the camera because, from memory, there were like two scenes. There was the one scene where it was like, you know, before, and then like
he's arguing with the police.
It stopped, and then
turn it off. Yes.
Then he's on the ground. No, then Garner's on the ground. They're saying back away, and that's, and I'm pretty sure, and hopefully we'll see it, that entirety of the available video was presented to the grand jury. I mean, that was, you know, central.
It's a secret. We don't know.
No, but if the court agrees,
let's hope.
Then we will.
I'm saying if the court agrees, they can release evidence presented to the grand jury in testimony.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Tenyo. I'm from John Jay, and I wanted to ask, please don't insert me in a campaign style like you've been doing tonight. And I just wanted to ask, why is it that we're not building a positive white identity? Because in the black neighborhood, as a Haitian, I went to high school here. I know what I've heard and I know what I've witnessed, and there's a lot of anxiety and frustration against the police, especially white police officers. And there's not a positive white identity being built in the black neighborhood. The same way I have a feeling too, there's not a positive black identity being built in the white neighborhood. And with white people, it's much harder because they have the history of slavery to carry on their back. Why is it that we don't build a positive identity for those two groups who's been fighting for so long?
I'm going to leave that to you.
Well, you mean among, listen, I totally agree, because when you have the other and you don't understand folks and you don't understand things culturally, I actually believe, and I wrote in reaction to the Garner case, white people better start talking to white people. You know, like there's supposed to be progressives and liberals and folks who, in fact, interact with black folks. And we're always talking in this country about having a dialogue. You know, black folks need to, and I disagree that we don't have folks like Brother Barnett, you know, interacting in a dialogue and having positive images of Republicans, just like because of a legacy of slavery and because of stereotypes. We even have, you know, brown and black immigrants that come to this country with a very negative stereotype of African Americans. And so I agree, but it takes, you have to affirmatively do it. Yeah. You actually have to put it in the curriculum in school. You actually have to encourage integration. You actually do have to have affirmative action and hiring. You have to be
how much harder is that because of the grotesque racial segregation, not only in the schools, but in housing? I mean, how segregated this city is. How do you find that? I mean, there, you know, the upper reaches are more integrated than the mass reach, and than the mass.
But I think we have to have a determination. This is, and I do believe, one of the greatest nations on the face of this earth. If we can go to the moon and to Mars and have such science and technology, once we put our mind to it, we can do this. I just don't think that we have the will.
Let me go to, of course, the Republicans don't believe in science, but that's a separate issue.
Could I answer
yes, sir.
the person's question?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think that as far as having conversations, interaction with each other is extremely important. But I think what is equally as important is changing the conversation within the black community. We don't talk about investments. We don't talk about taking full part and participation, I should say, in capitalism, in terms of businesses and things of that nature. We don't talk about values. We need to restore the family structure. Right now, the family structure is broken, and the values are actually coming from the street. So yes, we need to talk across racial lines, but we need to change the conversation and change the structure and what's happening in the black community. I see a lot of these things that are happening in terms of interaction with the police and other things. We can go down a laundry list of different things. Those are all effects, but not the cause.
And the cause is because we're not black capitalists? What?
Look, when we don't participate like we should in the political process, that's number one. We don't talk about growing wealth. We're great at being consumers. Let me finish. We're great at being consumers, but we don't talk about investments. We don't talk about the full participation in capitalism.
But we do talk about it. We just
no, we don't. No, we don't.
Yes, listen. I've been to one group, one seminar, one big convention after another. Those conversations are going on. Are they going on in the same rate as in white society? People who have ruled this country and the whole structure is set up from them?
I
no,
disagree.
But it is
respectfully
happening.
disagree. But in my conversation with a lot of the youth, especially the youth, the full spectrum, but especially the youth, I try to instill in them the importance of education and the importance of investment and take part of American capitalism.
Let me start again because we're down to about 5 minutes. So
My name is Reginald Bellin. I'm glad that you guys are here during this forum. One question I have, wouldn't you think if our politicians would stop thinking about getting elected,
Yes.
and just sit down and talk like 5 of you guys are talking and lady is talking right now, things would change in America. It's not only a black America, white America, Latino America, it's America that needs to be changed. It needs to start with us, it needs to start with politicians as well.
Can I jump on that?
No, let him jump on it. No, go.
No, you go first. Go ahead.
I
You
just
first.
wanted to kind of maybe we could hear other questions since time is limited, and we want to kind of hear what students have to say.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
Come, ma'am.
Actually, well, I'll jump in and say a quick note. One of the things I said during the election is that our political process has become gang-like, where it's Crips versus Bloods. It's becoming a blood sport, and we're not focusing on
The
issues and not focusing on the people. So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate the question.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Giovanna. I'm from Queens College. I want to first off thank you for taking the time off to give us this great forum. I guess it's safe to say that the lack of voter turnout has always been an issue in this country, election after election.
Right.
So I would like to propose an idea and just to have your thoughts on it. What do you think would happen? How impactful do you think it'll be if the government were to declare Election Day a national holiday, where every federal building is closed and businesses were closed so that people have more access to actually go out and vote and have their voices counted?
I agree.
I would make it a paid day.
Yes.
Of course,
Absolutely.
of course, you have to remember what Jimmy Breslin said when he ran with Norman Mailer for mayor and city council president in 1969. And in those days, this was an accurate statement in those days that he was mortified to be involved in the process that involved the closing of the bars. Because in those days, the bars had to close on election day.
Bertha, I would like to know if you believe that the results of what happened in the Eric Garner case would be any more justifiable if you were to switch the colors of the cop and the person who was being arrested, Eric Garner, or if it was anyone else, other than white.
Okay, because we're running out of time. There were really two questions.
I just have a problem with, again, police acting with impunity. The answer and the truth is no one should be shot down, left in the street, or chokehold and murdered by the police, no matter what color they are. The fact of the matter is black and brown people are disproportionately killed by white policemen, and they receive no punishment.
Well, it's
36 times more likely.
whether, Rudy Giuliani, who had to inject his own incendiary view into this whole situation, he's always helpful. Talked about black on black crime and this 90% figure, and that of course more than 80% of white crime white victims are the victims of white crime, but that's just crime. But black on black crime is black on black crime.
Kind of
so I've only got 2 minutes left, so please.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Fernandez, and I'm from Queens College. My question is, there's a lot of great ideas, but the main thing is, what should we do to execute it? What can we do to
elect us
to fix it? What is it that we need to do?
Only one person here is running.
That's right.
Who's running?
You know, I mean, obviously, you know, what you do is you put pressure. I mean, you know, there are a number of ways to try to do what you want to do. John Burnett chose one way, which was to run for office. Bertha Lewis has been at this for an awful long time. Michael Aronson, in his own way, has been doing it through the pages of the Daily News. You know, politics is not a linear. It's it's not a linear process. It's kind of a messy. It's a messy give and take.
But at CUNY, we have places like the School of Public Affairs that has 700 graduate students in public affairs.
And you have the internship
The speaker of the city council is a graduate of the program, and people that want to get into careers in politics can get the training that they need so that when you go out there, you're informed about the issues and you actually do good, not just do the right thing.
Last question.
No, very quickly. We got 30 seconds.
All right, how's it going? My name is Monero Graville from John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I just wanted to ask, what kind of methods do you guys propose to start increasing voter turnout? A lot of people get excited about Black Friday and not really elections, so should we hold up the raffles or something like that?
I think I mean, one of the ideas was obviously to declare it a holiday.
There's a whole bunch of same-day registration.
Yes. Actually, I agree with Bertha's suggestion in terms of when you turn 18, you get it
automatically.
Now now we have an agreement.
But you got to pull. It's not polling. It's pulling, knocking on doors, pulling people out on an issue, and voting for the candidate that stands up for that issue.
I think we're out of time.
So glad to end on a great note.
I want to thank everybody for. I want to thank everybody for joining us on CUNY Forum, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.